Hi, welcome to Carolina Crafting. I'm Jackie Jentz. While we're at the Blue Ridge Mountain Art Association, I got to talking to Bill Groce and found out that he was a wood carver specializing in birds. Today we're going to go up to his house on top of a mountain and see his workshop and have him tell us how he makes his wonderful bird carvings.
Really appreciate your coming over and look forward to seeing if we can talk about bird carving in a way that is interesting and makes sense to folks looking in. Currently I'm working on an American kestrel piece, and so the research on that was done some time ago, and I developed a clay model for the kestrel actually a year or so ago. This is the clay. We use aluminum flashing to strengthen the tail and the wings, but I was able to, and turning heads in wood is very difficult, so working with the clay I'm able to turn the head of the kestrel so it's looking at the viewer to get the feathers accurately sized, and the bird is ready to carve. The piece that we're going to be talking about is a folk style chickadee as opposed to a realistic style carving. This is a simple bird that I've recently used in a class over at the Blue Ridge Mountain Art Association. And like any carving, it starts with research. So I did research on the measurements for the chickadee. I recorded those on a piece of illustration board. Worked my color test to get my colors set, and then using the measurements and photographs developed a pattern for the bird, both a side view pattern and a top view pattern. So the next step is to draw the profile view using the pattern, and then bring the profile view to the bandsaw and cut the side view, which leaves a block of wood that is accurate from the side and fully square from the bottom. I then tape this block back together and use the top view pattern to draw this outline, take this back to the bandsaw, and cut the top view. That leaves you still with a squared off block, but now both from the top and from the side we have an accurate representation of a chickadee. The next step then is to use a knife and to round off these rough edges and begin to shape the head and bill, and begin to bring the block from a squared off state to a rounded off state, and eventually to the finished state. Then painting and mounting it completes the process. Now we're going to look at that process, and instead of finishing with a folk style bird, we're going to finish with a more realistic style bird. This time we're going to work on a titmouse. The process is still the same, the research to make sure that we can portray the bird accurately, developing the pattern, both top and side view, moving from the pattern to the sawed out blank. And now we have a bird that is taken already beyond where the chickadee was. We have carved the primary feathers and the tail feathers, and you can see that the bill and the head to tail is much more complete than the folk style carving. And to give the realistic look of the bird, we need to make the feathers look realistic. The hard feathers, the primary feathers, and the tail feathers, we use wood burning. And we put in the feather barbs and veins, to simulate the look of the hard feathers. The body feathers, the back, the side, the belly, are soft feathers, contour feathers, and they will blow in the wind, change with movement, and so they have peaks and valleys, and so we carve in to make them look soft. We carve in the peaks and the valleys, and then use a stone to texture the feathers to make them look realistic. Now we're going to look at burning feathers, which is just terribly exciting. I hope that you get 30 or 40 minutes of this stroke by stroke burning. But this is a wood burning pen. They are readily available now. We're not in the 70s. It was very difficult to find something light and useful like this. It has a sharp edge, and this one has a thick wire, which means that it will burn cooler and not discolor the wood as much as a thinner tip will. And there's no secret to this. It's simply a stroke by stroke, putting in the feather texture, wanting to remember that in nature there are no straight lines, so you want to get curved lines the whole time you're working here. We'll first begin with the feather shaft, and we'll let it very slight curve, and then we'll begin the painstaking, but for me very relaxing process of just burning in each feather barb one at a time, paying attention to where it starts, close, adjacent to the previously burned bark, making it getting as many separate strokes as you can into each inch of wood. Okay, next we're going to look at stoning texture into the bird. And since we will be grinding wood, I'm going to put my mask on. Since I can't talk, or since you cannot hear clearly when I have the mask on, I've taken it off because we won't be generating a lot of dust. But anytime you're grinding wood and generating dust, you really do need a mask, because some woods are very irritating and different people react differently to different woods. For stoning, we're going to be using any of these three tips. These are small stones, ceramic or natural stones on a 3/32 inch shaft. This is a Guesswin grinder, but a Dremel tool will accomplish the same thing. And what we're going to be doing, following the flow of the feather track, we're cutting in individual lines, letting the curves fool the eye into thinking that it's a natural wind-blown feather. As we have been grinding the feather texture, we are causing some rough edges to come up along the cut, or generating dust that we need to get out before the piece is painted. And so we'll use a fiber bristle brush in the Dremel or the handpiece, and just stroke that through the area that we have stoned to smooth it out and help create a better surface for painting. Alright, we'll look a minute at what it takes to make feet. If you're not going to enter a birding competition, there are some firms that sell pre-cast pewter bird's feet in various sizes, and you can use a copper wire to mount the bird and use with the cast feet. For competition birds, as birds that are going to be in a show or formal competition, you need to make the feet from scratch, and so we start with copper wire. This will be 2 toes of the bird. We've bent each end of the toe into a claw, And I have already taken this to this small anvil, and I have tapped the toe to flatten it, which will give me enough metal and area to work with. We'll go to the grinding tool, get a carbide bit, and carve the toes into a realistic shape. Then we assemble the bird's leg and toes, bend them into shape, and then this is a soldering jig. This is two separate individual holding arms and one two-armed piece. And you can see in the center here the components that I had that are held together. Then we'll use a soldering iron, soft solder and flux, put a drop of solder there, and solder the whole assembly together. And once it is soldered, we have an armature made out of copper wire, and we will use 2-part epoxy, mold the two pieces together, let the epoxy adhere to the copper wire, and use dental picks and knife edges to sculpt the epoxy into the shape of a realistic bird leg. And we'll take a look in a second at the bluebird leg, for an example, to see what the finished leg looks like. Alright, this is the bluebird, and so you can see the claws, which are the copper that we hammered and ground to shape, and then the copper armature is covered with epoxy and shaped to simulate the joints of the bird. Alright, this is a white-throated sparrow, and this is a good example of what we're trying to do to be realistically true to the bird, but also to think more about artistic presentation. For example, this pile of rocks is actually hand carved out of wood, and the bird itself is oval, and I decided to use the oval shape as the design theme and concept for this piece. So the walnut base is oval. The bird has a lot of oval features. The rock pile is oval and has a lot of rounded pieces. For coloration, I decided to mirror the color of the bird. So the gray undertone of the bird starts at the top of the rocks, and the russet umber color is echoed in the base of the rocks. This is a wood thrush. The other birds that you will see that I've carved since March of last year. This piece was carved back in the mid-80s, which was about the last time I carved anything until I started when we moved up here. This is a pair of goldfinch mounted on a bull thistle stem. This piece is the more realistic interpretation of the chickadee. Well, thanks so much for coming by. It's been a lot of fun, very interesting for me, and I hope that somebody out there can learn a trick or two about the art of bird carving. Thanks so much.
Thanks, Bill. I found your work fascinating, and I hope all the folks out there like it too. Come back and see us again at Carolina Crafting. See you next time.